Hello, my name is Eric Michael Lloyd. I have a master's in psychology, neuropsychology concentration. I also have a license to sell health insurance and life insurance in the state of Florida, and I'm also a registered behavioral technician. I wanted to read something uh, from Wired.com by Lawrence M. Krauss. Um, this is called Beam Me Up in Einstein, Scotty. This was actually published in 1995 in November of that year on the 1st of that month. Ever wonder about the physics of Star Trek's transporter? Atoms or bits indeed? Reg transporting really is the safest way to travel. Lordy LaForge to Lieutenant Reginald Barclay in Realm of Fear. Lately, I keep hearing the same question. Atoms or bits? Where does the future lie? 30 years ago, Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, dealt with the same speculation, driven by another imperative. He had a beautiful design for a starship with one small problem. Like a penguin in the water, the Enterprise could glide smoothly through the depths of space, but like a penguin on the ground, it clearly would have trouble with its footing if it ever tried to land. More important, perhaps, the meager budget for a weekly television show precluded landing a huge starship every week. How then to solve this problem? Simple. Make sure the ship would never need to land. Find some other way to get the crew members from the ship to the planet's surface. No sooner could you say, "Beam me up," than the transporter was born. Perhaps no other piece of technology, save for the warp drive, so colors every mission of every starship of the Federation. And even those who have never watched a Star Trek episode recognize the magic phrase. I was permeated. It was permeated our. It has permeated our popular culture. I recently heard about a young man who, while inebriated, dove through a red light and ran into a police cruiser that happened to be lawfully proceeding through the intersection. At his hearing, he was asked if he had anything to say. In well-founded desperation, he replied, "Yes, Your Honor," stood up, took out his wallet, flipped it open, and muttered into it, "Beam me up, Scotty." That story is probably apocryphal, but it is testimony to the impact that this hypothetical technology has had on our culture, an impact all the more remarkable given that probably no single piece of science fiction technology aboard the Enterprise is so utterly implausible. More problems of practicality and principle would have to be overcome to create such a device than you might imagine. The challenges involve the whole spectrum of physics and mathematics, including information theory, quantum mechanics, Einstein's relation between mass and energy, elementary particle physics, and more. Which brings me to the atoms versus bits debate. The key question the transporter forces us to address is the following. Faced with the task of moving the ship to a planet's surface roughly 1028, one followed by 28 zeros, atoms of matter combined into a complex pattern to make an individual human being. That's the fastest and most efficient way to do it? What's the fastest and most efficient way to do it? So I'll read that again. The key question the transporter forces us to address is the following. Faced with the task of moving from ship to the planet's surface, roughly 1028, that's a 1 followed by 28 zeros. And that might be at times. Roughly 1028, in parentheses, 1 followed by 28 zeros. It would be better to use significant figures in that one. But that many atoms, incomprehensible amount of atoms of matter, combined in a complex pattern to make an individual human being. What is the fastest and most efficient way to do it? A potentially revolutionary concept, at least so claimed by various digital media gurus, is that the atoms themselves are often secondary. What matters more are the bits. So what about people? If you are going to move people around, do you have to move their atoms or just their information? At first, you might think that moving the information is a lot easier. For one thing, information can travel at the speed of light. However, in the case of people, you have two problems you don't have with, say, books. First, you have to extract the information, which is not so easy. And then you have to recombine it with matter. After all, people, unlike books, require the atoms. The Star Trek writers seem never to have got it exactly clear what they want the transporter to do. Does the transporter send the atoms and the bits, or just the bits? You might wonder why I make this point. Since Next Generation Technical Manual by Rick Sternbach, Michael Okuda, and Gene Roddenberry describes the process in detail. First, the transporter locks on target. Then it scans the image to be transported, dematerializes it, holds it in a pattern buffer for a while, and then transmits the matter stream in an annular confinement beam to its destination. The transporter thus apparently sends out the matter along with the information. The only problem with this picture is that it is inconsistent with what the transporter sometimes does. On at least two well-known occasions, the transporter has started with one person and beamed up two. In the famous classic episode, The Enemy Within, a transporter malfunction splits Kirk into two different versions of himself, one good and one evil. In a more interesting and permanent twist, the Next Generation episode, Second Chances, we find that Lieutenant Riker was earlier split into two copies during transportation from the planet Neverla 4 to Potemkin. One version returned safely to Potemkin, and one was reflected back to the planet, where he lived alone for 8 years. If the transporter carries both the matter and the information signal, this splitting phenomenon is impossible. The number of atoms you end up with has to be the same as the number of atoms you began with. There is no possible way to replicate people in this manner. On the other hand, if only the information were being beamed up, one could imagine combining it with atoms that might be stored aboard a starship and making as many copies as you wanted of an individual. A similar problem concerning the matter stream faces us when we consider the fate of objects beamed out into space as pure energy. For example, in the Next Generation episode, Lonely Among Us, Picard chooses at one point to beam out as pure energy, free from the constraints of matter. After this proves a dismal and dangerous experience, he manages to be retrieved, and his corporeal form is restored from the patterned buffer. If the matter stream had been sent out into space, there would have been nothing to restore at the end. So Star Trek manual notwithstanding, I want to take an agnostic viewpoint here, and instead explore the myriad problems and challenges associated with each possibility, transporting the atoms or the bits. I'll go ahead and read that part in the next video. Thank you for your time.